And welcome to a commercially uncommercial installment of Ben's Junk. Yeah, I don't think this one is exactly gonna rack up the views. But anyway, today's video is one of my periodic departures from the standard Ben's Junk formula, and I think today's episode is going to be a bit more of a history lesson than anything else. Now, when I was researching the recent Cult VHS Distributors archive episode, I was reading this book, or this ebook, I wound up having to download it, called 1,000 Cuts, which is about the subculture of, obviously, film collectors, but specifically the ones that were into films that you generally couldn't buy legal studio-approved home copies of. So no Black Hawk, no Castle films. But this led me down a rabbit hole of film collector and video enthusiast magazines, a fair amount of which I wound up gathering via Fleabay, just so I could have some real copies to look over. But anyway, there was this one publication that was referenced over and over in that book, and that publication was called The Big Reel, or simply Big Reel. And The Big Reel was officially a movie review / book review / nostalgia magazine. However, at its peak, I would say that an easy 2/3 of each issue was devoted to ads, mostly taken out by private individual film collectors who were either selling or seeking, shall we say, the kind of film prints that the FBI was cracking down on during the 70s.
Two FBI men posed as collectors of these films to get into the freshman home. Bob had put an ad in a hobbyist's newspaper.
They said, we're with the FBI and we're going to seize these films because it's illegal to own 16mm copyrighted films.
I was only able to get my hands on one issue of The Big Reel, and that's this one, from September of 1982, with Johnny Tarzan Weissmuller on the cover. And for what it's worth, I believe The Big Reel went under in about 2003, so it lasted quite a bit beyond this. But if I open this up, it's actually this huge, unwieldy, multi-part, 88-page beast of a magazine, all done tabloid style. But let's see here. I've cherry-picked, obviously, a handful of ads, hence all the post-it notes. And so let's get down to business here, and hopefully I can get them scanned and posted to archive.org before this video comes out, so you can peruse these pages along with me. But let's go in order here. So let's start with this review of Ed Wood's, or Ed Woods's, as they keep mistyping it, Plan 9 from Outer Space. And obviously this person had read the then recent Medved Brothers Golden Turkeys book, of course the book that named Plan 9 as the worst film of all time. And I guess given that this was 1982 here, Plan 9 wasn't really as readily available or well-trodden as it is today. There's still a definite air of, oh my god, have you seen this to this article? Now, aside from that, taking up the rest of the page, there's no shortage of, legally speaking, better defined ads in here. So we got a couple of ads for film projectors, used film projectors, and another ad for a store in New York that specialized in posters and publicity stills and all that, stuff that is indeed legal. So all this is on the up and up here. Now, I found this especially amusing. This whole section is called the mailbox, if I can get it in the shot. And it's where they put the letters to the editor. And this was just hilarious to me. Given all the dubious material in here, which you'll see more and more of as we go along, the big beef amongst these letter writers, for the most part, seemed to be the then recent Henry Fonda film On Golden Pond. The letter writers were upset at the amount of profanity in the movie, especially this big long letter that starts just below the solid black bar there. It takes up quite a bit of space. But after reading these, I came to the conclusion that I think they were just kind of upset that it wasn't 1938 anymore. And that's another odd paradox about Big Reel. Again, for all the dubious material, you would think that they'd be a bit more, open-minded in their cinematic tastes. But a lot of it is very much older films, but generally more family fare, more family-friendly stuff. So here's some most likely illegal prints, but, it's stuff that's not exactly heavy or dirty. And then there are some public domain ones down in there, the D.W. Griffith and Buster Keaton and so on. But yeah, I laughed a lot harder at that than I should have. Now here's easily one of the most brazen ads in here. It's from ImageWorks, based out of Madison, Wisconsin, and they're offering up complete 16mm prints of stuff like The Wizard of Oz and Singin' in the Rain and several of Alfred Hitchcock's big movies, and of course Deep Throat for Mom and Dad. What else is in here? A Hard Day's Night and The Maltese Falcon and King Kong. So many other titles, too. On the front page of the B section, we've got a full-page ad for the Nostalgia Merchant, one of those companies that I probably need to cover on Archive someday. And, of course, Nostalgia Merchant was 100% legal. They were mostly into public domain stuff. And they did do some copyrighted stuff, but they licensed it. I think they had some Hal Roach in there, so Laurel and Hardy, stuff like that. But it's 1982 when even a public domain videotape is going to run you at least $40. And the 2-tape sets of the serials are $80. One thing I ran into over and over on these more legally gray area ads is the phrase, or some variation of the phrase, no rights given or implied. Lest you think you were buying the rights to the film as opposed to just buying a copy of, say, the Marx Brothers, A Day at the Races, or The French Connection, or the Adam West Batman feature. All right, now we're getting more into my territory here. The ephemeral stuff. So had I been around in 1982, I could have gotten this entire lot of driver's ed, largely scare films, I think, for $65. All right, here's a real big spread here. But I wanted to point out here, and this occurs in a few ads, it was such a small community, really, when you think about it, that these people that were taking out these ads in here had absolutely no trouble personally, individually calling out people who had screwed them over. So, shame on you, Mr. Hutchins of Calabasas, California. So, more diehard Ben's Junk viewers may remember the video that I did. I think it was a couple of years ago now that I did on the world of yesterday. And given how mostly squeaky clean that publication was, I was a little surprised to see them in here. But again, small world. Now, this really amused me. Some of the ads were so poorly done, and whoever took out this ad was just hell-bent on getting what had to have been at least a half-page worth of material onto just a quarter of a page. But they've jammed all their text together, and they've scribbled stuff out by hand, and it's just this big, illegible blob. I've looked at this a few times now, and I still can't make heads or tails of it. I'm not even entirely sure what their game was. Maybe that was the point. All right, I got a nice big spread here to look at, and I think I'll have to actually break it up. But, well, there's a picture of, I think that's Dorothy Stratton. The last few pages of this is devoted to actors and actresses who'd recently died. So Henry Fonda, and we already discussed on Golden Pond, but yeah, that was the last thing he ever did. And I like I said, I think that's Dorothy Stratton, who would have died around this time. But that's not what I'm shooting for here. So let's start with this ad for another forgotten, mostly public domain video reissue company, Video Reruns, of Lakewood, California. And it's kind of the standard public domain fare, stuff that you see in the dollar bins these days. But also some stuff that's a little more questionable. Like there's, I know it's hard to read, but there's some Elvis Presley stuff in there and Star Trek. And let's see, moving on. Here's something to keep in mind the next time you're griping about the cost of blank CDs, blank Blu-rays, thumb drives, hard drives, etc. Just think about these tape prices. Now, bear in mind, this is 1982, so slightly more than double this for inflation as of my making this. But we've got Coastal Cinema here from Jacksonville, Florida, and they're selling Betamax starting at blank beta, starting at $8.50 a pop for the L125s. And those are the real short ones. They top out at 45 minutes at the slowest speed. And if you're into VHS, you're still looking at a minimum of $10.50 for T60s, though they'll knock off $1 per unit if you're ordering at least 10. And then we got this big full-page ad from Harmony Video and Electronics in Brooklyn. And they will only sell you blanks by the case. But here's how it works out when you boil it down to individual units. So in this case, you can get Betamax L500s starting at $8.15 a unit. And L500 will top out at 3 hours at the slowest speed. But what really intrigued me about this one is you can tell that the format wars were still in full swing here because Sony is not doing VHS. Likewise, JVC and RCA are not doing beta. And it looked like Panasonic and Hitachi were hitching their wagons to VHS as well. But then you have all these other companies that were happy to do both. So beneath this random picture of Betty Boop's head, we've got an ad for the Sinecure company. And in 1,000 Cuts, the book I referenced earlier, they mentioned a few times this trend that was going on during the probably mid-70s to early 80s, in which people would treat films with some sort of chemical composite, and I think lemon juice as well, and it would fill in any scratches on a scratched up film print. Now, I don't know for sure if this is what this company was doing, but this process did indeed fill in the scratches, But as it turned out, it also sped up the decay of the film. And there was a whole breed of collectors that would not ever collect any print that had ever been cleaned. Okay, last point of interest here. We have got a... Let's see if I can make that a little neater just to hold. All right, let's go for it now. We got a handwritten ad, which was taken out by presumably the Jeff Hogue, who nowadays owns the rights to some of the great bad movies, most famously Santa and the Ice Cream Bunny, which is certainly one of my favorite so-called bad movies. But he's trying to track down Ray Dennis Steckler. And Ray Dennis Steckler he made some very early music videos for bands like Jefferson Airplane, but he's best remembered nowadays for the MST3K classic, and I always botch this title, The Incredibly Strange Creatures Who Stopped Living and Became Mixed Up Zombies. I think that's right. And that's another one of my favorite bad movies. But yeah, just goes to show you how much greater a length you had to go to prior to the internet. But anyway, that is going to do it for today. Hopefully you enjoyed this. And if you haven't already, check the video description for a link to scans of the pertinent parts of this. And yeah, we'll start doing the techie stuff again next time. I'll see you again soon.